Welcome back to another episode of Iron Culture presented by Mass. I'm excited because we have one of the top natural physique athletes on the planet joining myself and Trex in the studio today, and that is one IFBB, WNBF, OCB Pro, and multiple federation world champion Maddie McConnell. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
No, it is our pleasure. Trex, we've done similar interviews with some other top level athletes, and what's cool is that right now in the iron game more broadly, and I include powerlifting in this, there seems to be a higher level of participation, and we're seeing a higher peak of terms of the performance levels and new standards being set every season in both powerlifting and bodybuilding. And the new standard that's been set in the figure division, I would say, is sitting right here with us in the studio, which is absolutely three different places online, but nonetheless, proverbially sitting with us in the studio in one Maddie McConnell. I don't think, honestly, it was just 2023, end of 2023 or early 2024, where we were talking about Becky Pateman and Natalie Hayes being like people who had done historic things, and no one else kind of had this resume in the female side of the sport. And the closest thing on the men's side of the sport were a couple folks who'd won the world title twice in the WNBF or had been title unifiers like Brian Whitaker. But man, the whole sport's leveling up. We got Babacar, who came back and is the first person to win the men's bodybuilding title in the WNBF 3 times. And now we've got even more women who are just friggin' crushing it. So I think it's is there something in the water? Is natural bodybuilding popular, or what's going on, Trex? Explain to me.
I mean, you're coming to the wrong guy. We could do we could try to do some testing on different water sources. I'm sure there's something in there.
Mm-hmm.
Not to get on a tangent, over in my neck of the woods, we had stuff in the water, but not the kind of stuff that makes you jacked, more the stuff that gives you chronic health issues. But anyway, it's interesting because I feel like, bodybuilding was huge culturally. If you go back 70s, 80s, you couldn't turn on a movie without seeing somebody that was essentially a bodybuilder who could act. You know what I mean? But I wasn't really in the game. I wasn't alive, which is one of the biggest reasons I wasn't in the game in the 70s and 80s. So I don't know how competitive, like what kind of numbers they were getting at competition turnouts. But we've seen this before, like you alluded to. I think powerlifting, without going off any stats, purely based on vibes, it seems like in that like decade from like 2010 to 2020-ish, I feel like powerlifting just accelerated so quickly, especially just in like a 5-year period toward the beginning of that decade. And it does seem to me, just based on the level of performance that we're seeing, that now natural bodybuilding is kind of following that and having a bit of a surge of its own. So hopefully the trend continues, because the weirder things get, the more I feel vindicated, because Helms, as you know, everybody decided in 1995 that the largest person in one of 2 commercial gyms in Boston and LA set the official standard for maximum human muscularity. And Maddie, I'm referring to a paper that was published in 1995. They said, we want to figure out how large a human being can get without steroids. So naturally, you look for like 75 people at 2 commercial gyms, and whoever's the biggest represents maximum human muscularity. And that became so pervasive in natural bodybuilding culture, the number derived from that paper. And I am excited to see just how stupid that paper looks as people continue to get bigger and bigger, because I am one of those lunatics, fringe idea, dangerous idea. I think you need to sample more than 75 recreational gym goers to figure out the maximum limits of human potential.
I mean, that seems reasonable to me, Trex. That was the Curry paper from 95 on fat-free mass index. And
I apologize, Maddie. I had to throw a paper in here. I have to talk about one study. It's going to be a very athlete-focused interview, but you just got to give this to me.
That's all right. We'll give it to you.
Yeah, and in fact, Trex, Maddie and I will give you a little bit more, because one thing, I don't want to bury the lead. There's a lot of interesting things about Maddie as an athlete, and one of them is that she is fully plant-based. She's vegan. Is that right, Maddie?
Yep, that's correct.
And how long have you been vegan?
I actually went vegan the same year I started bodybuilding. So 5 going to be 6 years in November.
Oh, well, the carnivore crowd would say, man, you could have been so much greater if you had jumped on this hugely debilitating diet. And how do all these anti-nutrients flooding your body? It's amazing how you're actually alive, let alone thriving on a bodybuilding stage, according to some proponents. But so Trex, the reason I bring that up is, A, it's really interesting. B, I think it'll be really great to hear how you structure your diet, Maddie, for other people who might be considering or potentially worried about the detriments of following a vegan diet, and if that's going to impede their athletic goals. But we've got a lot of recent emerging research on this topic that I think we can use to, I will say, support, bolster, or at least, act in companionship with your experience that can inform people. So there may be additional studies that come up, Trex, which will hopefully keep you engaged and excited. Although I think as we talk about the resume of this one Maddie McConnell, you'll probably feel engaged and excited either way.
Yeah, and Maddie, you are in a safe place. Helms and I are both advocates of very plant-forward diets to differing levels. I was on a vegan diet for the better part. It is like maybe a year and a half or 2 years there that I was strictly vegan, still very strictly vegetarian, but Helms, I couldn't live without whey protein. What is a man to do? It had me crawling back, a little bit of dairy in the mix, but other than that, plant-based.
Well,
and Helms, are you pescatarian mostly?
I am pescatarian, so I am only contributing to the mass slaughter of animals that live in water, because apparently they don't count in my brain.
Helms hates fish, actually, which is an odd thing. For him, it seems more personal.
Yeah.
And also, he doesn't like healthy water ecosystems. So it's not just that he eats fish only, but he only eats fish that are commercially fished from waters in a way that's not sustainable. So he searches out the companies that do that and deplete resources in a very irresponsible way.
Yeah, if I'm not seeing chunks of porpoise, dolphin, and like I'm looking for also just if I'm working with a given company that I'm eating their fish products from, I expect them to need to be either shutting down and opening up somewhere else because they've depleted the fishing resources of where they're able, or that they're very knowingly, destroying one ecosystem at a time.
To be fair, Helms, I think it's weird the way it gets personal with you and that you actually do hate fish, but I understand why you enjoy the scarcity of fish from overfished areas, because it's just like with any kind of gem or jewel. It's like nobody wants the common stuff. The exclusivity and the rarity is really what brings the value. So I understand that, at least on an economic level.
Yeah, when I go spearfishing, I make sure that I have a conflict diamond encrusted spear that I use. In all seriousness, because sometimes certain people with certain personalities, or those who are listening to this podcast not as the native English speaker, I am obligated to now ruin the dry humor that we had. I actually do the exact opposite of all of that as far as my fish consumption. Normally looking for line caught or sustainably caught fish. And typically not from any of the things we talked about. But I will say, my general stance is that I think we're in an era and time in the human species evolution that I respect people who think about the ethical impact of their diet, regardless of where they draw that line in the sand for what works for them. And I personally have drawn it where I have drawn it. And I think we can leave it at that. And most importantly, what we want to do on this podcast, draw in circles, not borders, is to help people feel empowered, informed, and comfortable, and have an evidence-based perspective, as well as a practically informed approach, which Maddie's going to help us with, to fulfilling the dietary guidelines they wish to follow based upon their personal preferences. So, all joking aside, I just think that was an important point to make.
Yeah, it wasn't funny, though.
Well, that's fine, because humor is something that not everyone likes, Trex. Some
That's
people,
true.
they will say
I
that they're
read the
not a fan
comments.
of the banter. Yeah.
I'm aware of that. Yes.
Yes. Some people think that we're going to stop bantering for the first 10 or 20 minutes of the episode. I even had some people go, oh, now that Omar's left, we're not going to have banter. And I said, you shut your mouth. It's terrible that Omar left. We're accepting it, but we're absolutely carrying on the tradition because it wasn't just Omar who liked to banter. We all do. So
Yeah.
get
But
off
all
the
right.
lawn.
We are off your lawn and we are on to talking about all of Maddie's accomplishments, how she goes about achieving all of this on a plant-based diet, and how people might consider structuring a plant-based diet, what we can learn from a world champion, and the more recent research in this area, which Helms, as you know, is certainly a hobby horse of mine.
Let's do it. So, Maddie, per standard iron culture practice, as our guest, we have given you barely enough floor to stand on. But we're actually going to turn the mic over to you. I would love to hear. Talk to us about your first entrance into physique sport and your competition history, and how that brought you today to where you have entered the esteemed halls of iron culture, where we are lauding you as this well-deserving champion.
Sure. So I actually didn't know anything about bodybuilding. I was very into fitness and did a lot of high intensity interval training that was all body weight. And I met my husband, who at the time was lifting, and he was doing Julian Smith's daily pump. And he was like, I think you'd really like weightlifting. You should join me for leg day. And so I kind of eased my way in and just started doing leg days here and there. And then I really started to like lifting. And then I ended up getting a job at Genuine Fitness, which is where I still currently work in person. And we are very much we serve general pop people, but we are a bodybuilding gym. And Aaron Orton, who is a promoter, yep, he is very much into natural bodybuilding and a promoter for natural bodybuilding. And just from working there and being surrounded by, like, majority of my coworkers when I first started working there were already WNBF pros. So being around them kind of got me into that idea. And originally I just started, I wanted to do one competition season just because I thought as a coach, if I was to coach people who wanted to do a show, I would need to at least do it once myself. But I saw that as kind of like an opportunity to maybe broaden my clientele base. So I tried to enter my first competition season in 2020. COVID happened. That lasted all of 2 months. And then I went back 2021 and did my first competition season. And then I competed in 2 shows, the Columbia Classic and the Cecil Phillips, neither of which, because they had just happened shortly after COVID, had enough people for me to go pro. So then I competed again in
If you don't mind,
2022.
what categories did you compete in your first 2 shows in 2021?
Yeah, my first show I did bodybuilding and fit body.
Nice.
And then my second show I did bodybuilding, fit body, and I only did figure because Aaron Orton, who is a promoter, needed an extra figure person, wanted more bodies on the stage. So kind of volunteered me to do it. And I did it and I did well and was like, oh, maybe I actually like the whole figure thing. So it wasn't even I didn't plan to do it necessarily. I still was very green and new to bodybuilding. So I kind of just he told me, I think you should do this. And I followed along. So yeah, then I entered into my 2022 season. After that, I did the Columbia Classic. Then I did the Oregon Open, which is an NPC show. I won the figure overall. And then I competed in Muscle Mayhem. I won my figure pro card. Then I competed at the Cecil Phillips Classic, won my fit body and my bodybuilding pro card. And then I went on to Worlds and won Worlds. in 2023. I don't know if you want a whole timeline.
Let's take a second because big things are happening here. First off, you won your pro card in the same season that you also won the Pro Division World Championship, which is a rarity in and of itself, that someone after only a few years of bodybuilding is at the point where not only they can turn pro. That is incredible. Took me some time before I turned pro. Still haven't got my world title yet, and we'll see how later this year goes, or if that ever happens. And then you got pro cards, all of them. You're getting you can play cards with your pro cards. You have so many, and then boom, you win the world title. I have to say, I did see you win the overall at the Mayhem, and that's when I got to meet you. That was my honor and privilege. And I don't know if I told you just how well I thought you would do in the rest of the season, but let's just say I'm not at all surprised that you won a world title or did very, very well in the pros. I was like, oh wow, the shape, the build, the muscularity, and also the presentation, which it surprises me now in retrospect that you had not been on stage that long. You clearly had prepared yourself because you looked like a veteran on stage. So anyway, I was very impressed by that 2022 season, and because it is quite rare to be able to compete at that high level, moving from the amateur to the pros that quickly.
And Maddie, just for the record, you've now taken the place. I used to have a cliche story I would tell people about someone who, like, right after they won their pro card, just did absolutely incredible at Worlds right after. And it's kind of my canned speech I give to people if they were really had their hopes up about an amateur show, they were going to for their pro card and they got second. And it's like, honestly, you could have like the second best physique in the world and you never know who's going to show up that day. But I think your story is a little more concise than the one I normally tell. So now Maddie is the standard for that. If like, listen, you show up to an amateur show, you could have a pro world champion physique, just walk right up and take it from you. So brush it off, move on, keep going.
Well, I'm honored to take that place. But yeah, and let's see. Then I just go back to the timeline, I guess. I took 2023 off as an improvement season. And then I competed again last year, 2024. And my goal going into the season was just to do as many big shows as possible. I was telling you, we had talked just before this off camera, but I had listened to your guys' podcast with Natalie and heard her recant all of her big shows. And I was like, man, if Natalie's doing it, I want to see what I can do. So that really inspired me. And I like financially it was a lot. I wasn't honestly sure if I was going to be able to do it because bodybuilding, let's be real, is not cheap. And even if you win, it doesn't really help you all that much payout wise. So I did the Oregon State Open and the Oregon State Natural, which the NPC has like 2 back-to-back days now for that show. So the first day was untested, second day was tested. I ended up winning my figure overall for both. And then I went on in August. So that was in June. And I had to go till August to compete in the OCB Slayer, which was in Arizona. I'm from Oregon, so had to take a plane ride over. And I won my pro card for the OCB. And that was my first ever OCB show. It was a really cool experience. It was a wonderfully ran show. The audience was packed, super, super loud, probably like one of the loudest shows I've been to, which made the whole thing just really fun. And that also qualified me for the Orton. So then I went to the Orton in late September, which was in North Carolina, and I won the Orton Cup. And then Mr. America was my next big one on the docket. So I was in New Jersey in October. I had to write all of these down ahead of time because otherwise I would have forgotten because I did a lot of shows. But I ended up getting second place in that. And then shortly after that, the beginning of November, I did the Ben Weider Natural, which was in Virginia. And I got first place and won my IFBB Pro card, which was really cool. I didn't honestly expect that to happen. I honestly didn't expect any of my wins going into any of them, to be real, but it was sweet that it happened that way. And then I went to WMBF Worlds, and that was at the end of November. And I went against Courtney, who I had lost to at Mr. America. So I definitely didn't expect to win Worlds, just because of that. But I ended up winning at Worlds. So
you have an
yeah.
arch nemesis now in Courtney, because
Yeah.
she beat you at America, and then you beat her at Worlds, and I'm sure this is going to go down as I'm sure you guys hate each other, probably send hate messages to one another, and yeah. So I'd love to hear more about that rivalry.
Yeah. We both connected over dogs. We were talking about dogs behind stage at Worlds. She was really friendly to me at Worlds. So there's no bad blood. She has an incredible physique. I think we both have different strengths. Like her legs are a little bit bigger than mine, and I feel like my upper body, at least for that day, maybe looked slightly bigger than hers. So it kind of just is dependent upon, it's bodybuilding is a subjective sport, so kind of depends on who's in the judging panel. But it was in my favor on the last one. So, but we're tied 1-1. So it'll be interesting if we go again.
I've got a question and a comment, if I may. This is the question: is the Yorton Cup, does that move around, or is it always in North Carolina?
I think it's always in North Carolina, but
where specifically, if I might ask?
It is in Charlotte.
Okay, I need to catch that one of these days. I had no idea that was down the road from me, so that was purely for my own knowledge. Glad to waste the time of the podcast for me getting that. But hey, if you're out there and you live in the Charlotte area, stop by next year. My comment was, I think it's really cool. So when I got into bodybuilding, I was just really into the IFBB pro men open, just mass monsters, the whole deal. And one of the things about it that was a little bit frustrating back in that time. So this was kind of end of the Jay Cutler era, going into the Phil Heath era. One of the things I noticed was that with their judging, they were really into, when it comes to who won shows, they were really into consistency, even if looks weren't consistent. So basically, like, if you beat that person, at a show a month ago, you had to beat them by a mile for them to update their placing and actually, flip or invert that placing. So I personally think it's, some people might hear that there's flip-flopping in placements and think, oh, well, it's all subjective. But I that is true. It is literally subjective. But I think it's also a testament to good judging that two people with really, high-level physiques, depending on how they show up one day or the next day, the fact that there can be some of this, you beat them, they beat you, this kind of flip-flopping and placement. Ultimately, I think that's really awesome for any kind of competitive endeavor. And I just wanted to comment that I love to see that in natural bodybuilding, because as an IFBB fan of, like I said, in that era, in that federation specifically, at a certain point, I just kind of checked out, because I was like, well, unless this person just comes in looking terrible, we know they're going to win, because that's just how it goes these days. You know what I mean, Helms? Were you tapped into that world at that time?
No, absolutely. Yeah, I probably came into being a fan of the sport just a few years right before that. I think 2004 was Ronnie's second to last Olympia title, and then I think 2006 might have been Jay's first. And then I met Jay. He definitely remembers, because he was guest posing at the.
And I know Ronnie remembers meeting you. Yeah, you and the IFB, you and the Mr. Olympias are just all.
Yeah, me, Jay, Ronnie hanging out. They definitely haven't forgotten who I am by any means. And I was in a line of 80 people when I met Jay, but I was the tallest of the middleweights, because this is an untested show. So I know, and definitely taller than Jay, which is wild considering you outweighed me by 100 pounds. But and he was leaner. So anyway, it was good times. But no, totally know what you're talking about. And I think one of the very few positives of there being, I think, 648 natural bodybuilding federations is that because there's cross-federation competition, you will see a little more variation. I think because it's like, okay, these are sometimes literally the same judges traveling around in the same federation. If you're in a similar region or at the pro level in a given federation, it's not even just, we feel like we need to be consistent. It's like, I just judged these two guys against each other last month, and there's no way for that not to kind of contaminate your perspective this time. So I don't even necessarily think it's like, hey, we got to hold party lines. I think there's some of that going on. So, the Mr. America, Miss America, and then WBF Worlds, I doubt the actual criteria is a little bit different, which is actually something I want to talk to you about, Maddie, because I think the figure division is actually coming up on its 20-year anniversary. I think it got introduced around 2004, 2005, somewhere in there. So it is, I remember, like, it was right when I got into the sport, that was the new kid on the block, and then
it's always been there for me. So I got into it right after that. So I'm surprised to hear that it's only a 20-year track record there.
Yeah, I mean, there has been basically, not to get too off on a historical tangent, once we saw female bodybuilders being quote unquote too muscular and basically going, steroids work for us, and this is also untested. We should do this. Iris Kyle starts crushing everybody. Honestly, the most dominant bodybuilder in existence, if we actually want to count it by the numbers. She pipped, both Lee Haney and Ronnie Coleman, and just kept getting more Miss Olympia titles. And they were like, all right, listen, we need other options, because not everyone should be that. And say what you will about it, but one of the ways that bodybuilding has historically tried to curtail drug use is by just trotting out new divisions. And then each division gets more muscular, starts using more drugs. The standard goes up, and they go, and another one, and another one. And it is sometimes disappointing to see natural bodybuilding doing the same thing, because I think there are some categories that there's not a strong distinction outside of the posing on the women's side. So I would like to
Helms, if I could ask you, if you had to recommend, because like you said, with IFBB, a lot of times they keep going lower and lower, and the terminology reflects it. It's like classic bodybuilding and then into physique. I would like to propose, wellness. I'd like to propose the next two. I think the next one should be leisure, and then the one after that should just be sedentary. And I still think we're going to find that the sedentary division just naturally gravitates toward about 235 at 7% body fat, at a height of about 5'6". But nonetheless, they need to start using language as a tool to really demarcate some of these divisions and stop that upward creep. That's my 2 cents.
I think they should just lean into the pure transparency of what they're actually trying to accomplish here. It should be everything at the highest dose division. It should be no GH division. It should be SLIN only on weekend division, SARMs only. I don't lift but only take drugs and train lower body, bikini. And then a few others I think would be a good fit. But just say like exactly what they're expecting of you. Like in the wellness division, it's like train upper body once every 3 weeks, take a bunch of drugs, and train legs all the time. Division. I think that'd be good.
Yeah, well, I look forward to the division for people who basically, when the old school pro hormones got banned, they just stocked up on a 40-year supply, and they're just using that. I think that would actually make for a pretty good division.
That would be called the I died 15 years ago from liver failure division.
I was gonna say you either died or you got the potency finally wore off enough that you're in the clear.
Yeah, like half the time you're taking literally nothing, and it's just like leaves and a pill, and the other time you're taking like methyl 1 test, and you just die.
And I apologize, I got you off on a tangent. It's kind of what I'm here for, but I'm handing it back to you now.
Okay, so we're just gonna hand this baton. We're running a 3-person race, the 3x100, where you just lose because everyone else has a fourth person for the track fans. So off to Maddie. My question for you is, there's a lot of divisions, categories in female physique sport. And it's interesting to me that you got a taste of bodybuilding, you got a taste of fit body, you got a taste of figure, and you eventually went, you know what, I got voluntold into figure, I did well, and I think this is probably home base, even though I'm pretty capable in all of them. What is it about this specific category that speaks to you, or why you've chose to make this your home?
I do like doing bodybuilding a lot. And I think honestly, I'd maybe prefer to do bodybuilding. But I don't like doing a routine. I don't. And I also feel like I would need more size to be as competitive as I am in figure. And figure is just, I don't want to say it's easy. But I mean, we have way less poses. And the whole stage present thing is not necessarily my forte. I'm actually pretty usually like I wouldn't consider myself completely introverted, but I tend to be more shy and reserved. And so like my mom the other day was like, if you had told me 10 years ago that you'd be strutting around in your bikini on the stage, I would have said you're wrong. So that's just not like, I think figure's kind of the most mild of all of them because there's less required. But I also just enjoy it. I feel like it's really pretty. I love the silhouette of figure. And maybe one day I'll do bodybuilding, but again, I think I just need more size. So
That's totally understandable. So heels, necessary evil or nice feminine element that you enjoy, or somewhere in between?
somewhere in between. I get like it, I feel like they are very flattering and aesthetically pleasing. Do I like walking them? Absolutely not. Um, and that's what also I like so much about bodybuilding because it's just raw. There's no heels. Um, and I think your physique still looks really beautiful without heels. But when I do practice figure posing without heels, it just doesn't quite look the same. So, yeah.
Very true. So that almost makes me think that, fit body is kind of that nice healthy medium, right? Is that something you thought about?
Fit body could be. I do have my pro card in fit body, but I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, fit body is a slightly less muscular version of bodybuilding. And I don't know if I have maybe slightly too much muscle for that, or if I'm like kind of in the in between. I don't really fit into either exactly. And maybe I could, I don't know. I mean, maybe on the world stage, because there is more muscle. I guess maybe I'm just thinking about from more of like a regional standpoint. When I see fit body, usually it's more, um, I don't know if slender is the right word, but just not quite as muscular.
Yeah, my personal thoughts are that if you're really, really good in figure, you can pretty much go into any division because it is the symmetry division, right? So if you do exceedingly well there, you generally can make the jump to anywhere and be successful at the pro level. The times when that's not true is when you are really well developed in, say, back and delts, and not particularly overdeveloped in, say, like glutes, and you go to bikini route. So I actually don't think you would do, you do fine in bikini, but I don't think you would do as favorably as if you jumped into something like fit body. Because, if you feel that you're too muscular for bodybuilding, but not muscular enough for fit body, then you would probably also be too muscular for figure, which you're not, in my opinion, clearly. So I think you would probably do very well in fit body, actually. And I think you'd also do very well in bodybuilding. I think you have fantastic development. And a lot of the difference for bodybuilding compared to fit body and figure is posing and is highlighting conditioning a bit more. But it's still very symmetry heavy. I think bodybuilding lets you get away with maybe being a bit more of a blocky, really muscular kind of physique, rather than you being harmed by being, like a more symmetrical, not quite as big physique. We want to talk about Patricia Beckman, who's a great example of who was a top undefeatable IFPA back in the day, which is now the OCB Pro. She actually had a twin sister who competed in a different division. I want to say it was figure and identical twins, figure and bodybuilding, and they were both winning world titles. And it wasn't like she was way bigger than her sister. So I think sometimes we get a little bit too caught up in the different divisions or categories, I should say, in natural bodybuilding, because at a certain level, a maxed out physique who poses better, you just kind of figure, all right, what's my natural structure and what do I like better? Which poses am I better at, and which one hides my strengths and weaknesses, versus them being completely different chassis. In the untested side of the sport, again, when we are talking about these divisions, I mean, there are some athletes who go, should I gain 20 pounds for my next season? You go, yeah, I don't know. Like it's a health decision and a dosage decision. There's no natural athlete, unless if they've just started lifting weights last month, who goes, oh, should I go up 20 pounds or should I just not train hard or eat and not make the rest of my newbie gains and keep competing in bikini or men's physique, and do poorly. There's really no point. Like once someone's at the pro level, the differences in divisions are, I think sometimes we emphasize them perhaps more than they really are differentiated. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
Well, I'm afraid that you buried the lead there, Helms, because all I got from this whole conversation is that Maddie completely vindicated my stance, which is that we need to do away with posing routines in their entirety across all divisions. There's no place for this. Maddie, I pioneered the idea of the 20-minute bodybuilding competition. You get up on stage, you hit your mandatories. The judges, they can even walk up and down the lineup. Come on up on stage, join us. Whole thing's done in 20 minutes because Maddie, much like you, I'm more of the introverted side of the scale. Not as much into the, being in the spotlight, choreographed to music, etc. So, Helms, I think the numbers are really stacking up in my favor, and it's time for you to concede that the 20-minute bodybuilding show is the future.
Well, I know you're introverted, but when are you going to promote this show so I can come compete at it?
One of these days. I think that it serves a very important niche, which is approximately 30% of bodybuilders who would flock to it, Helms. There's money to be made here.
I mean, we're actually moving that direction. Like we've gotten further and further away from the traditional prejudging finals format, and there's a lot more straight through shows, which I actually like much better. I don't either.
Yeah.
Oh
Same.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't need a bodybuilding show to drone on forever.
And have the two different times where you need to come look your best. Like just say, hey, when are we going to agree we all look our best and let's knock this thing out,
100%. And you guys know I love bodybuilding and physique sport generally, but there's a peak optimal dosage for consumer consumption, let's just say, and it's not 12 hours. It's somewhere between a third to 1/4 of that, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. You tell your family, listen, none of this is going to make sense to you. You're going to feel like you've walked into an entirely different world and culture, and I only need you to be there for 14 hours. So can you do this for me? It's a tough sell, Helms. It's not easy.
No, it's not.
Also, you're going to have to rub some tanner on me, if you don't mind. That's also part of it.
Well, no. See, this is where you can tell that he is a man of the prior decade. Every show now has its own spray tanners attached to it. You can do it there. The last time I competed was 2017. They did have the spray tanner on site, and it was just at the tail end where they still had to put up the signs literally everywhere. No Dream Tan banned. If you use Dream Tan, we will send you to prison. The whole deal. So I'm aware that we've moved away from that, but the Dream Tan heyday was really quite a time for bodybuilding. Oh man.
It honestly almost ruined the sport because a lot of venues were just like, no, when we're never doing this again. You ruined our entire property and you're never welcome back.
It was a wild time, and it was so popular that people didn't necessarily. We had a collective lie that we told ourselves and how complex putting Dream Tan on was. That we had to do the circle, and then you have to pat it out, and then you need to do it for and
You gotta like slap it in.
you have to slap it in, or it won't stay. It's oil based, it'll just be slip and slide on your skin, and it became so popular, and the color was so much better than all the other options that I made the mistake of actually trying to get. Don't tell her I told you this, and she doesn't listen to the podcast, but she can hear me, so I don't know why I'm saying this. She did one figure show back in 2011. She was a one and done. Like, no, this is terrible. I'm going to stick with powerlifting. She did it on the way to cutting down to like the 52 kilo class, and was like, what's another 4 pounds? And she learned that those last 4 pounds really suck. And just like, no, I'm not doing that again. But 3DMJ circa 2011 was so dominated by bodybuilding athletes that we were all using Dream Tan. So my dumbass tried to put Dream Tan on her with her figure suit, and it was basically just like sitting in wet paint the whole time. So I made her experience that much worse. And like her color was fine as long as she didn't move at all. Which so figures
never competed again.
Who knows what?
Maddie, have you ever used Dream Tan?
I have not. No,
it was the best. So there's always a downside. Honestly, someone asked me at the thing at the conference, the SNA conference, like a week ago. Someone asked me like, "What is your least favorite thing about bodybuilding when you were competing?" And they thought I was going to say, "Oh, the being lethargic, being hungry, being tired, not being able to sleep at night." And I said, "Shaving my body, number one. I find it to be the most tedious and unlikable task in the history of the world. And number two, tanner sucks because Dream Tan back in the day, like Helm said, it's like wearing wet paint that will never, ever, ever dry. And if you touch it, it will smudge and it's ruined. And then you have to fix it." So it was like, I never understood how people coped with that. I guess everyone was just as miserable as me, just kind of sitting here thinking, I hope I don't touch anything for the next 12 hours. Again, another reason we got to do it all in one go. We can't do this twice, morning show, night show. But then trying to get it off was a nightmare. People would like, Helms, people would like use baby oil to try to rub it off in hotel showers.
Yeah.
And it was just a nightmare.
You go through a whole bottle of the baby oil too. I tell you what, I actually have the two same things that I dislike the most about bodybuilding, and two game changers for me, which have enabled me to have much more longevity. One, Nair. My skin loves it. I can leave that shit on. I can swim in.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I've heard so many horror stories where people are like, "Don't touch the stuff. You'll get chemical burns and all this stuff."
You will if you are soft and not.
Oh, you need to be tougher.
Yeah, you just need to have that. I think it's just honestly a skin reaction thing. Definitely try it out before you try Nair. Put it on, leave it there for 5 minutes. I can't joke about something that actually will give you a chemical burn, but my skin is not so sensitive. It works very well for me. I can just basically, I could just go like sideburns down. And then
no way. On your face it would work?
I mean, it's not as good for this stuff, but it is quite effective for longer.
Wow.
But I just cover myself in Nair, and it keeps it off you for like a month and a half too. So you time it right. You have a relatively truncated season.
That's got to be shortening your lifespan, right? That doesn't seem like a normal thing. Like you'll be hairless for 6 months. Just douse yourself in these chemicals.
6 weeks. 6 weeks, my friend.
I'm embellishing. It's part of the art.
Well, fair enough. But anyway, that made my life a lot easier. And then just being able to show up and be like, "Hey, spray me." And
I did that at my last show, and I was like, I still hate that when it's water based, you like have a sip of water and it dribbles down your chin, and now you're like, okay.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a big upgrade for sure.
But we're dudes, and we have it way easier than what someone who is competing in figure has to do when you're expected to wear a certain amount of jewelry. The posing trunks are a little bit cheaper than a figure suit. Maddie, talk to the dear listener about all of the bells and whistles that go along with competing in physique sport as a female, and how you feel about that and how you manage it.
And how angry are you at us whining about these two minor inconveniences? because
I
I
mean,
do have the self-awareness to understand how absurd that is.
the tanning is definitely not my favorite part either. And I've done both. I haven't done Dream Tan, but I did try to do my own tan a couple of times with Pro Tan, which it was fine the first few times. And then there was the trip to the OCB Slayer when I packed it in my check bag, which because, you can't bring it in your carry-on, and it exploded in my suitcase. So that was very fun. And I had a limited amount, like just enough to give myself a tan. So that was a layer of stress. And then for the Yorton, I also did my own tan. And multiple people commented that I was much lighter than everybody else on stage and that I wasn't dark enough. So after that, I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm just going to turn it over to somebody else. And I'm very thankful that there are people there to do that because, yeah, you can do it yourself and it's a hell of a lot cheaper, but there are stressors that come with trying to do your own tan. So, but yeah, do you want me to speak about like the expenses or like just all of the things that we have to purchase? Like, yeah, you said jewelry, heels are like if you're getting them on Shoe Fairy, you're like $150 for the nice pair that I have.
I never heard of the Shoe Fairy. Is that like the place where competitors go? Is that like the spot?
Yeah, it's like similar to like the Tooth Fairy. You make a wish and she leaves shoes under your pillow at night. No,
At a premium, apparently.
yeah, at a premium. Yeah.
And you've seen those heels. You get some serious neck pain from the Shoe Fairy. I tell you what.
Yeah. No, it's just an online website that someone recommended to me, and majority of the competitors that I've talked to, I think
I'm sorry to cut you off, but like I've never coached a female competitor, so I never thought about it. But it is a very unique, like niche specific kind of heel. It's not just like go grab some heels out of your closet, right? So I should have known that there's probably like one or two major retailers that pretty much everybody's going to. At least that's the vibe I get.
Wait till she gets into the figure suit, bro.
Okay. Yeah. I'm going to mute my microphone, sit back and take it all in.
So the figure suit is anywhere from like 800 to like 12 to 1300 per suit. I was very fortunate. At the Oregon Open, because I got a gift card for a suit. And then at the Yorton, if you win, the winners also received a sponsorship with Angel Bikinis. And Angel Bikinis, turns out, if you have a sponsorship with them, they will make you a suit for every competition if you want one, which was sweet. So I got 2 more suits from them. So I went from borrowing a friend's suit, and it was her first suit that she had ever, I think it was like a decade old. She'd competed for a really long time, and it was like an IFBB Pro suit that she had worn, and there was gems. Every time I put it on, I could hear like 10 gems drop onto the ground. So I would always bring glue with me and glue on because there'd be patches where gems were missing. I went from doing that to then having like 3 or 4 of my own suits, which was really nice. So I feel fortunate that I didn't have to spend that kind of money. I did spend that kind of money once on my first suit. But yeah, that is an expense. Whereas my husband, he's also a competitor. He also just became a WMBF Pro 2024. Shout out to him. He's also vegan. He paid like $40 for his trunks. So, and I think he was on some website. I think he even got like a deal. It was like a 3 for, I don't know, whatever it was, around $100 or something.
Back in my day, before men's physique was a big production, it was pretty much posing trunks they'd set you back about $20-$25. And
Cherry Bomb?
And what's that?
Cherry Bomb's website, is that where you went?
Correct. Type that URL in very carefully. You could find some similar websites of slightly related names. But yeah, there was like the one website that was like, yeah, because turns out it's hard to find like a Speedo in America, especially if you want different varieties of cuts. So yeah, we had our little Cherry Bombs retailer. Just wish it was named anything else, honestly. But funny story about it, because I was thinking, like, it makes sense that for a women's posing suit, I mean, the fit across so many dimensions has to be just right, so you can understand why it's got to be the right suit, and you have to probably buy multiple over the course of your career as you make progress and your body, dimensions change and things like that. The most recent time that I prepped and competed, I was like, oh, I have posing trunks, so no big deal. So I didn't bother like trying them on. I notoriously don't practice posing until like a week before, and then I go, oh my God, I forgot I have a bodybuilding show. Um, but anyway, I basically got way leaner than I ever had in previous preps, which is historically considered a good thing. But honestly, I had some very precarious situations on stage where I was not getting what I would call adequate coverage from the way too loose posing trunks. So, word to the wise, gentlemen, invest the additional $25, maybe buy a couple different sizes, just in case your prep goes well. And yeah, you don't want to be in the place I was in, because I couldn't focus on my posing because I was really just focused on moving my trunks to not get like an indecent exposure charge from being on stage. Very, very stressful.
It's an amazing
Helms,
sport, folks.
Helms, have you ever suffered from such a severe lack of preparation? I assume not.
Um, no, I've never come in I mean, I've definitely gotten leaner over the years, but not to the point where the trunks that I previously had didn't fit right.
Yeah.
Um, I will say that
Yeah,
there are,
my stage weight, honestly, my stage weight went down 15 pounds. So like I should have known. But yeah.
yeah, my very first season, I had a similar stage weight, but I got more muscular to what I have now. But there's also Jaguar, which is like this archaic website from the early '90s that is custom made suits that almost every Olympia competitor in almost all divisions uses these days, and you have to like fax in or call them, and they just have such good word of mouth. They don't care. They're just like,
Yeah.
I don't need to update this. Or it's like that restaurant that COVID still didn't even give them an online ordering system. They're just that good and well known for their food that they're always going to be successful kind of deal. But proposing trunks rather than, I don't know, Italian food. So
That reminds me, one of the biggest producers of metabolic carts. You think it's this, highly technical laboratory equipment, top of the line. I'm sure they've got a bustling team of research scientists in a big warehouse somewhere. If you call the Parvo Medics support line to get some help with the metabolic cart, the dude who invented it, his wife will pick up the phone and she'll be like, "Hey, what do you need?" He'll be like, "Yeah, can I talk to what's his name?" And she goes, "Sure." And you hear her basically like yell upstairs, like you're just calling like their home phone number, and they're just chilling at their house. So yeah, it's funny how some of those companies can like just be so successful that they skip the whole like marketing and growth phase, and they just say, well, whatever, we'll just send you stuff. You know who we are.
it's a good problem to have. Um, Maddie, I would like to transition away from Parvo and indecent exposure to asking you
I think
specifically.
I'm doing a good job.
You're doing a great job,
For
Trex.
the record.
We're glad you're here. I would love to hear what has been your approach to preparation and training and some of the things you've learned, because you've been relatively short-lived as a competitor. Most of the time you hear multiple-time world champion, you think this person's been in the game a long time. But it's been less than 5 years of actual competing for you. So I know that in many ways, some of this is relatively new. And I don't mean that to take away from your experiences or to suggest that you don't know what you're doing. But I would love to hear kind of how has this rapid success while you're still kind of learning the ropes, what does that interplay look like for you?
I think I would attribute a lot of the kind of like the expedited process just from working at a bodybuilding gym and being surrounded by so many pro athletes and witnessing them be successful and what it takes to get to that level. And yeah, I think that's really the main reason. But as far as like training goes, I typically train 5 days a week. There's been times where I've trained 4. There's been times where I've trained 6. It really just kind of depends on life and other variables and what I can tolerate and recover from and what I have time for. And then I am vegan, so but I do get protein, believe it or not. Through photosynthesis, actually.
Oh, from the
Did
sun.
dim long enough. Yeah.
To
Vegan
out.
long enough. Yeah. No, but in all seriousness, mostly from tofu, tempeh, seitan, soy curls, other like mock meat alternatives, which I don't use that often. Protein powder, I do supplement with like maybe 2 scoops in a day. But seitan is, for those that don't know what that is a meat alternative that's made from vital wheat gluten. And my husband and I make our own at home, and it's very, very high in protein, super low in fat. And for bodybuilding, the macros are freaking awesome. So like a 5-ounce portion has like 42.5 grams of protein and maybe like 1 gram of fat, and I don't know how many carbs. I'd have to like look at my FitnessPal, but super good macros. So usually I'll have like, when I'm structuring my meals, I try to have like 30 to 40 grams of protein per meal. I eat usually 3 times a day, 2 snacks in between, and then maybe a dessert. And for my proteins, I'll usually have like tofu scramble or a bagel with a slab of tofu on it in the morning, or like oatmeal, cream of rice, cream of wheat, something with like 1 scoop of protein powder. And then my other 2 meals, I'll have usually tofu at one and seitan at the other doing prep. And sometimes I'll use other things like PVP, which is textured vegetable protein. It's a dehydrated protein, very similar to like a ground meat consistency. So you can make like meatless meatballs with them, or use it as like a topper as like granola, which sounds kind of funny, but actually tastes pretty damn good. And then usually my dessert, I am a big advocate and fan of creamies. I feel like I made prep so much easier because you just get so many bites, and it's essentially just a protein shake. So I was having that regularly on prep. I do attribute a lot of my success to my creamy.
And Ninja Creamy.
So I'm not
Yeah.
familiar with this term, creamy.
He's out of the loop.
Oh, yeah.
He goes, no, you got to hook him up. And I have not joined the even though I'm still in the loop. To me, it just, and I'm willing to be proven wrong, Maddie. To me, it seems like just too much food celebration for me to participate. Like I keep things relatively bland and not focused on it. I feel like if I have to blend up some stuff, make a thing, put it in the fridge, and I'm like excited about having it the next day, it's already a pathway I don't want to be walking when I get hungry. But tell me I'm wrong, or say, no, it's still worth it, even though it's a little dream about creamies. Okay, go ahead.
I don't think prep has to be miserable. I think that there are ways to make your food still taste really good and get lots of volume. I mean, obviously you're going to get to a point where you don't get as much as you want, and you'll be food focused, and that's just kind of the name of the game. But creamy definitely helped from a volume perspective. Let me back it up. So a Ninja Creamy for Trex, it's a Ninja product. It's kind of like a blender almost, but it's like an ice cream maker / you could also make frozen beverages with it, which I haven't tried out yet. Summertime is coming, maybe I will. But you essentially can make a protein shake, or you could go without protein if you wanted to eat more less macro.
Or
I don't know.
A normal person, yeah.
A normal person. Yeah, we're the weird ones. But yeah. I specifically will make a protein shake, and mostly use almond milk, a scoop of protein powder, maybe some cocoa powder, PB Fit, a little bit of salt, and you freeze it. And then the next day you put it into your creamy maker, and it somehow magically whips it into like legitimate ice cream, where you can scoop it, turn your spoon upside down, and it doesn't fall off. Like it's phenomenal. So I would just prep like multiple at a time, and then you can top it with various things. I usually do like coconut whipped cream, a little bit of that, and maybe some cereal or fruit. But the first time I sat down to eat it, I think it took me like 45 minutes to an hour. And I turned to my husband and I'm like, this is a lot. And he was like, are you complaining? And I'm like, well, no. But it did take like a while to adjust because it is a lot of cold, like it's a basically a whole pint of ice cream that I got to eat every single night. But I would have to like prep for my creamy ahead of time, especially when I got really lean. You know, I'd put on my sweatshirt, my flannel,
Yeah.
poncho, my beanie. And then I even got really deep into prep. I ordered a heated blanket and I'd turn it on ahead of time. So it does make you really freaking cold, especially November. Like Worlds is the end of November. But well worth the I think $175 that we paid for it, which is kind of expensive, but again, totally worth it.
So it reminds me of Helms. You remember back in the day, people would do protein fluff. That was the big thing. I still don't understand how that was made either, but no need for another cooking tank. You just whipped up like egg whites or something?
No, protein fluff is just like the smallest amount.
Gum.
It's like guar gum and water. It doesn't even compare from what I've heard talking to people about Ninja Creamy. Like this has been something that has been universal.
But see, here's the problem though. Here's the problem, Helms. The bodybuilding culture has no credibility because every time the next thing comes along, they say, oh, protein fluff is amazing. It's decadent. You're never going to believe it. And so it's, you got to be careful with some of this stuff.
Here's the rubric, Trex, and this is a very, very, very effective rubric. Do they eat it deep in the off season? I'm not talking, I compete back-to-back years. I had 6 months of just still basically being starving and trying not to get fat. I'm talking like 2-year off season or longer.
Yeah.
Because I remember there are a number, like Arctic Zero was the biggest Emperor has no clothes thing. Like, oh, this is great in prep. And then the off season, you're like, this is trash. This is terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't last. The next kind of gen was protein pancakes. So you make those amazing in prep, or you mix the protein powder, a little bit of protein mix, and you only half cook it so it's a little melty in the middle. Oh, it's like a lava cake. Off season, absolutely not. I'm eating actual food. Halo Top, pretty good. I might eat it in the off season, but the amount I want to eat, maybe it gives me the runs because there's too much, sugar, alcohol. So let's leave it at a certain point. I'm good. I will tell you that everyone I talk to who has Ninja Creamy, they eat it in season and off season, and that to me is saying something.
Yep. You just put extra goodies in the off season. Peanut butter, globs of peanut butter, mini marshmallows.
Oh, yeah.
All the good
Ooh, you could crunch up some Cinnamon Toast Crunch and put it in there. That would be my recommendation. Maddie, I did have another question, food related, based on what you're talking about. How do you go? You mentioned that you make your own. I always mispronounce it. Is it seitan? Seitan? How do you make it?
So Vital Wheat gluten very much looks like a flour consistency, and there's a bazillion different ways to make it if you look up recipes on the internet. But
if you were a lazy, genuinely bad person who could not commit himself to anything challenging, then how would you make it?
I think the easiest way, so in a blender probably, or you maybe could get away with mixing it in a bowl if you're truly lazy enough or too lazy for the blender. You do some like tomato paste, nutritional yeast, some veggie broth, and whatever seasonings, maybe some liquid smoke. And then you mix your Vital Wheat gluten, which is that flour consistency, with that liquid mixture. And it forms into a dough, which you would knead the dough. And then depending on if you want to make like patties or steaks or meatballs or whatever kind of shape you want it to take, you would then form it into those said shapes. And then you can boil it, steam it, bake it, grill it, whatever your preference is. They all come out slightly differently. So if you try one seitan recipe and you're like, I'm not really sure, just try a different one because they can be very different. But it's very similar to like when we make it into a steak and we steam it, it becomes very chewy and dense like a steak. It's kind of hard to explain. You can buy it in the grocery stores, but it's usually pretty expensive. Making it in bulk is a lot cheaper.
Yeah. And one other question I had for you. So obviously, if I were smart, I could just rewatch and piece together the timeline. But did you ever do bodybuilding or do lifting at a high level before you became vegan, or have you been a vegan for the whole journey here?
I've pretty much been a vegan for the whole journey. I started the first time really lifting was in 2018. Now it's just maybe once in a while I would go do a leg day with my husband from Julian Smith's Daily Pump. But it was not like I was following a program, consistently going, tracking my weights. It was kind of like a random workout for fun. And then 2019 is when I started actually following a program, and then that's the same year that I went vegan.
Nice. Yeah, that's yeah, it's one of those things. I think a lot of people are so skeptical that you can actually build that type of like world champion physique, being a vegan from start to finish, or even a lot of people even think, get as far as you want as an omnivore, then if you go vegan, you're going to lose it, and it's, I feel like there's so many people doing at a high level. You'd think it would, that myth or misconception would be put to bed at this point, but I guess we got to keep talking about it more, Helms.
We
Yeah.
do.
When I went to Mr. America, this was my first year of being part of the Plant Built team. And we're a group of athletes, like 30 of us, that all competed in various sports at Mr. America, because it's not just bodybuilding. So we had strong men and women, kettlebell people, and powerlifting.
Mm-hmm.
And we did really, really well there. We had some really incredible athletes. And yeah, it's really cool to just, you see this group of people walking around. And I think like people still think vegans are like weak or frail. But if you saw us walking, all of us together, like there's some pretty muscly people, and pretty freaking strong people. So it's kind of cool to show others that there is a different, you don't need animal products to be healthy or strong.
Yeah, I think there's been some pushback both just in the anecdotal observations of who's successfully doing that, and also some like nice kind of stepwise forms of evidence in the published research as well. One thing I do want to note is that this is also a changing space. It's a lot easier to be plant-based in 2025 than it was in 2005 and even 2015. And I do want to call out, and I'm actually curious if this is intentional or just works out that way, but so soy is actually pretty damn high in lysine, while seitan is actually kind of low in it. So these are, quote unquote, complementary protein sources. And despite the unproven claim by some dietitians that every meal must have, complementary amino acids, and that if you don't have lunch, including all 9 essential amino acids, that your arm's going to fall off. I think it's probably more important that broadly looking at your diet, you have the full complement of essential amino acids. So is that something that you've intentionally done to try to have those different amino acids, different protein sources to cover your amino acid bases, or is that just kind of the way it's shaken out for you, Maddie?
No, to be honest, I'm not like sitting down and calculating like how much leucine I'm getting with this meal and, all my different amino acids with each meal. It's not something that I really even think about. I just make sure that I'm getting enough protein. I make sure that I'm getting a lot of like variety when it comes to my protein, and that I'm getting a lot of variety in fruits and veggies. That I'm not just sticking to the same things over and over. And anecdotally, for me, it's worked, and I think there's this misconception that being vegan and bodybuilding is slightly harder. And I think you actually mentioned that you think that it is slightly harder, but I think it just requires intentionality. And whether you're vegan or not, bodybuilding itself requires intentionality. So as long as you're, like making sure that you're getting a variety of proteins, fruits, and vegetables, and that you're consuming enough protein, I think those recommendations aren't just for vegans. It's just for bodybuilders anyone that's interested in bodybuilding as a whole.
Yeah. And, we were talking about this off air. I think it's important that at the time I was at my peak coaching era, it was even more rare to hear about bodybuilders who were vegan or even, lacto vegetarians. And I didn't become a pescatarian until I moved to New Zealand, because New Zealand at the time was pretty behind everywhere else as far as like vegan technology and even just commonality. And also the humane farming practices here are far better than they are in the U.S. So I felt much more comfortable with being able to consume a plant-based but not exclusively vegetarian or vegan diet and being pescatarian here than I did in the U.S. But anyway, I swapped, I think 2010 or 11, from being fully omnivorous to being lacto-vegetarian for a couple of years, and did my 2011 season as a lacto-vegetarian. And initially, I was like not even feeling better about it, because I was like, I've consumed so many egg whites and so much Greek yogurt, and I know the egg industry isn't great, and neither is the dairy industry. And it took me some time just to get a little more creative. But we're also talking about 14 years ago. And when I was coaching, I relied on that experience to help people. But there was fewer, I would say, low-carb, low-fat vegan protein options that weren't supplements at that time. So the specific examples you gave are, I think, really helpful to the listener, because I had no problem coaching in the off season. But I think if in that time, if you're relying on like chickpeas or garbanzo beans, tofu, and not a whole lot else except for like beans and lentils, that can be quite challenging. If you don't know where to get these, TVP, mycoprotein, tofu, and seitan, tempeh, all those options are so much more abundant, easier. And also there's fake meat options that are lower in carbohydrates and fat now than they used to be. I did run into some problems only during prep with athletes. Like there wasn't really an option to go low carb, because it would also mean that they were going low protein, or they would have to be consuming 2 to 3 protein shakes per day. But again, we're talking circa 2013, 2014. So I will admit that I think that perception of mine may be a little just old manny and just being out of the game. So that's why I'm really glad you spoke into this and challenged that, because I think that goes hand in hand with the research. So for example, if you look at what many protein researchers have said about vegan diets and their potential negative impact, or at least inefficiency, you could argue, for muscle building, it's largely based upon soy protein and wheat protein, like most of the studies that were done, maybe some rice protein studies, and also importantly, done in isolation, not looking at the whole diet, and looking at them from basically 2 lenses: the digestibility corrected amino acid score and or the amino acid profile, and then overall saying, well, they're of a lower protein quality. But that's just frankly just not true anymore once you start looking at muscle protein synthesis studies, which Trex and I will tell you are heavily limited in and of themselves and not even consistent when you compare between animal proteins. But now there are close to double digits number of proteins that actually have similar outcomes compared to milk, meat, or whey, or even, casein-based or egg-based muscle protein synthesis outcomes. Pretty decent digestibility scores. And more importantly, we've got actual longitudinal data comparing vegans to omnivores now. So I think it's really cool. And I think it's great to hear that it is easier than even my experience as someone who was relatively bought in, that during prep, it's also not necessarily that much harder than even in the off season. Did it take time for you to get used to that? Or were you like, hey, well, it would have taken me time just to follow a plant-based diet, regardless of whether I was bodybuilding, just a change? What's your perspective on that transition period?
I think originally just going plant-based was the biggest transitional lag, I guess, where I was just still trying to figure things out. And luckily, I didn't do my first season competitively until 2021. So I had a little bit of time as a vegan, even though I was still training and I started intentionally bodybuilding. I hadn't actually had to do a full contest prep yet. So I did have a little bit of time to kind of learn and play around with different protein options and figure out what the macros of those were like. But really kind of once I knew, it's just like planning any other, like macros for the day. You just plug it in and see if it gives you what you need. And if it doesn't, you figure out something else. So I don't think that it really is that much harder. You just kind of have to know how much protein, carbon, fat ratio of whatever it is you're eating, just like if you ate meat as well.
Absolutely. And I think what you do is really all that needs to be done. Consume at least 3 protein boluses per day, have variety in your protein intake as a vegan, and get enough in. What is your rough intake as far as daily grams of protein per day that you consume?
And that's the other thing, because I've heard it's recommended if you're vegan to slightly err towards eating more than the 0.8 to 1 gram per day. But that's honestly what I've done, and I haven't really had any issue. And even with this last prep, think my protein was like 135 grams, and my stage weight was 135 pounds, but I kept that protein consistent the whole time. So I was actually maybe closer to that 0.8 and didn't really seem to lose much muscle in the process. So, and I think everybody's different too, so just because that worked for me doesn't mean it's going to work for somebody else. They might require more protein. But I, generally speaking, since I started going vegan, have stuck to like 0.8 to 1 gram, depending on where I'm at.
And Helms, if I may jump in, that's completely compatible with the evidence. Basically, that actually is kind of the sweet spot, the range at which we could say, honestly, a balanced omnivorous diet versus a balanced vegan or vegetarian diet with reasonably complementary protein sources, or just a diversity of protein sources. At that level of intake, they actually end up looking pretty equivalent. And that's one of those things where a lot of misconceptions in nutrition that get a lot of cultural purchase and get perpetuated are the ones that have a little grain of truth to them. And the grain of truth there is, if you were eating half that much protein, then you actually would need to eat a little more vegan protein to kind of make up that difference. So at the very low protein intake levels, the way I like to frame it is that animal-based proteins essentially give us more efficiency in terms of supporting muscle growth at suboptimally low intakes. But by the time we get up to an intake level that we all pretty much agree is ideal for building muscle, at that point, those differences seem to really wash out. So yeah, that's completely compatible with the evidence, which is really fortunate, Helms, because I like when evidence matches real life and vice versa. That's always a little bit more convenient. And if I may throw in a little thing here for the people like me, the morally and ethically deficient people who eat in a way that is not necessarily refined. Maybe we don't have a lot of skills in the kitchen. Maddie, you talked about all the ways that you're able to create, these really, solid protein sources that have good macros. But there are a lot of people like me out there who, like to cook via microwave exclusively. And Helms, I've had a revelation. They make at my grocery store very affordable little chicken strips that are not made of chicken. They're made of plants. And the macros are really good. It does not look that different from, just a plain old white chicken breast. And so I'm able to get these little chicken strips and throw them in the microwave for like 4.5 minutes and go about my day. And for me, it was actually really difficult to switch from an omnivorous diet to a plant-based diet because my willingness to invest in cooking time and my cooking skills were so severely limited. So I'd make like a big soup with a bunch of lentils in it and be like, cool, that's my protein source. I'll prep that and eat that for a while. But yeah, so some of these plant-based alternative meats, kind of fake meats, they have helped me go back to the way I used to eat, which was just so convenient, where I would just hit the crock pot with a bunch of shredded chicken and then I'd be like, oh, this is great. I can do like barbecue with this, or I can, I could just do all these little different mixtures that require no effort. So if you're like me and you're thinking, I'm interested in trying a plant-based diet, but I don't want to be skinny and frail my whole life, and I don't want to pick up a side hobby of making new exotic protein sources. Guess what? You can be a world champion like Maddie, one of the top muscular physiques on the planet, and simultaneously you can eat like me, which is essentially the diet of a 6-year-old if they just didn't change it and were somehow taking care of themselves.
I mean, dude, the options are just they've just exploded so much. I think this just showed that the microwave option that you had right there, and I would even say that it's not even just it takes being intentional, then it can be just as good, and you might have to have a lower protein intake before you notice the difference. I would say with a certain level of intentionality, I'm not even sure the differences in quality are even worth speaking about. Like, just one example, one of the meat-free options that is not this crazy engineered meat is like yellow pea protein based stuff, regenerative yellow pea protein. That's a really common one for vegan chicken now. I think the one in New Zealand is sun-fed chicken. And it's like for 30 grams of protein, it's 5 fat and 4 carbs. And pea protein actually has a really comparable profile to whey, So you could be doing that. You could be doing seitan. You could be doing tofu. You could be doing mycoprotein. And I think if you had just with those 4 examples compared to your typical omnivorous diet, I don't know that it would be all that different. I don't even think you'd need to compensate even if you were in a relatively low protein intake. And
you technically don't even need to. You technically don't even need to cook tofu. There's times where I'm actually more along the lines of with you, Trex. I don't really like cooking. I do like baking, but I am fortunate enough to have scored a husband who loves to cook and try new recipes. So I can't really even take credit for making a lot of he usually always makes the seitan. But when he's gone and it's just me and I'm lazy, my lazy self, I won't even cook my tofu sometimes. I'll just cube it up and put some sauce on it with some veggies and call it good. You can eat it raw. You don't need to. Or
you don't even heat it up though. You're eating it cold.
It depends on what I'm making. Like sometimes I'll do a sushi bowl and I literally just buy shredded carrots.
What's that?
Yeah, shredded carrot cabbage mix from Trader Joe's. It's already chopped for you. Edamame is already shelled. Nori, like the seaweed, I just crumple that up on top, put some tofu in, some sriracha.
There you go. Sriracha cures
all things.
Yeah, that sounds really good. I have a thing that is not worth discussing and polluting the minds of the good iron cult. I have a thing with temperatures in food. There's some foods that I'm like, if it's supposed to be, if I feel it's supposed to be eaten hot, and then I think of eating it cold, I'm like, no, this can never happen. But the sushi bowl that you described, because now my brain's thinking of it as sushi,
do you like
not
cold
tofu.
Pizza? Do you like cold pizza?
No, you heat it back up. You heat it back up, right, Helms?
I thought we were alike, but now I'm not so sure.
I can't
actually. So here's the funny thing:
pizza is not morally acceptable as a bodybuilder, so whatever.
Only with pizza do I. That's like the one thing where with cooking, I sometimes go the extra mile. And here's the tip for everybody: what you do is, you throw it in the microwave to get a little bit of heat going, but then you finish it on low heat in a pan to get just that little it's like recrusting the bottom crust, so it's not like mushy bread. So you got to get the pan and the microwave involved for that one.
See, you're not lazy. That was a 2-step process.
No, I go the extra mile for reheating pizza.
Gordon Ramsay Trexler on the podcast there, yeah.
You hadn't heard of a Ninja Creamy, but have you heard of an air fryer?
I own an air fryer, and I have made some lovely tofu in it. That is a fact.
And what about reheating your pizza? Have you tried that?
I have not. No, is that a better option?
That's definitely a thing. People talk about it. Yeah.
All right. I'm very open to that. You're not going to get any. I'm not going to fight you on that. That sounds lovely.
Oh, that reminds me. I do have to go back to the Ninja Creamy thing. So it increases a ton of volume. That's the main thing. You can use sweetener, and then it's basically getting to eat ice cream, but the calories are very low, and it's cold, so you get to eat it slow. So you've kind of got the benefit of like the air popped popcorn thing, where it's not technically that good of energy density, but it's a volumetric from actually space perspective. I could see that. I think for me, it's just I find I do best in prep when my food is there. I have it. I enjoy it while I'm eating it, but it's not something that I plan, prepare for, or really think about that much. I kind of set it and forget it. That is my hesitance. And it's not that I think prep shouldn't be enjoyed, or that you shouldn't enjoy your foods, or that you can't make it taste good. It's just that the amount of brain space that food should take up during prep, I think, has an inverse relationship to how easy prep feels, personally. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'm having a birthday today, so if someone gets me an Ninja Creamy, I won't complain. I'll try it.
Today's your birthday?
It's your birthday?
It actually is. I'm 42. I'm old.
Wow.
I'm
Happy
40.
birthday.
What is this, the 4th anniversary of your 42nd birthday? Come on.
I love that. You know what? It's as far as my Exertos is concerned, I'm an immortal vampire in my 700s. So we'll go with whatever age you want. Yeah. So good times.
So going back to the way that you eat, do you do a meal plan system for yourself? Like, do you make yourself or how do you go about that?
So I have what I call the default diet, which is kind of like
a rice cake.
He's going to not be too disappointed in how similar it is. I have a very, very similar structure on a day-to-day basis, and then I just swap out carb or fat sources or increase different things depending upon what my energy intake goal is. So currently, I wouldn't call it a meal plan, but like my lunch is always the same. And it's just, in the off season, I add another piece of fruit, and in prep, I take that piece of fruit out. I have Greek yogurt before I go to bed. It's just depending upon whether it is sweetened or unsweetened in the off season. My dinners just essentially pull out the carb and the fat in a very similar timing or structure. Breakfast, same kind of deal. I'll go from having like oatmeal with the side of like eggs or smoked salmon to, like multigrain toast with mushrooms and spinach with poached eggs kind of deal at breakfast. So when I make the shift, it feels qualitatively and looks to an outside observer who's not like a macronator. He's doing the same thing, but I've slashed like 1,000 calories and I can make further cuts as needed. So I don't track my macros anymore. I just focus on a calorie range that I auto-regulate based upon how I feel, some of my satiety cues, activity levels, lethargy, and the appropriate level of lethargy, satiety, hunger at different stages of prep, because there's a certain point where it's how much of that are you expecting to feel. And if you're 24 weeks out, very little. If you're 2 weeks out, it is what it is kind of deal. And then, also gauge biofeedback from the scale, visually, performance, that type of thing. So I just focus on like a minimum protein goal and a calorie range that I auto-regulate. So that's kind of how I roll.
And Maddie, I have a question for you based on some of the things Helms was just mentioning. We have talked to some world champions, much like yourself, who they basically, when they talk about prep, they go through the things that mortals like Helms and I go through. And they say like, yeah, at the end of prep, I'm super hungry. I have trouble sleeping. I get really lethargic. I'm freezing all the time. And then sometimes we'll also talk to world champions. Now, here's the thing, Helms, I don't know if you know this. If you're a world champion, you have at least good genetics. And that is a statement I'm insisting upon, because to be a world champion means you have to at least have good genetics and apply everything you've been given and be excellent at it and put in all that time and effort. So it doesn't diminish a single thing about your accomplishment, but I cannot too many times in my life, I've heard people who are literally elite at sports say, actually, I have like the worst genetics in the world. And I'm like, you can't. That's just not how it works. But we've talked to some people who are not just unicorns in terms of their success level, which you've achieved, But they also talk about prep and they're like, yeah, it doesn't really get under my skin that much. I don't think about it too much. And I don't really get all that hungry or lethargic. I guess I do feel a little more cold sometimes now that you mention it. So like for someone who is the elite of the elite, what does your prep experience actually feel like to you?
I feel like sleep is the one thing that I do notice kind of tanks, but it's usually not till the end of prep. And I usually wake up, like I go to bed around 8:30 or 9 p.m. I wake up at like 1 and then maybe again at like 3, and I get out of bed at like 4 or 5 just because I can't sleep any longer. And that's usually just like the very tail end of prep. But generally I feel like when I'm busy, my hunger is not all that bad. And I do feel tired and somewhat lethargic, but my mood seems to still remain high because I just love prep. And I've had several comments on that within our gym that people tend to say that they're like, I don't know how you seem so happy all the time when you're starving yourself. I'm like, I don't know. I just really enjoy it. And I do feel like I handle it pretty well. Which is why like I also take a very gradual approach. So I started my prep January 1st and it didn't end until November. And so it was like a very, very slow and steady rate of loss, which didn't make my deficit feel all that extreme, because it wasn't. And so I think it makes it for me slightly easier when I have much more time. It's also like less stressful because I'm not feeling like I'm limited on time, like I'm trying to push myself extra because I just have a longer time period to lose the weight. So for me that works well. Yeah.
2 additional questions. This is complimentary to your question, so this doesn't count as an interruption. How much weight do you lose from start to finish your prep?
I started prep 158 and I ended prep 131.
Gotcha.
Whatever that math.
That's good. So that's a good chunk, like 20, 25-ish pounds. Yeah, somewhere in there. No, that's a good chunk. And then the second question would be, do you find it very challenging to keep your weight in check in the off season? Or is it pretty like, oh man, I'm really hungry post prep, and then after a few weeks, I'm kind of like even keel and I can regulate it pretty well?
I feel like it depends on the season. I think each season I've come out of it slightly better. And this season was much more gradual. I'm now like 155, which is just shy of where I started prep last year. But it really kind of takes me, I know like sometimes there's this general weight recommendation of being 10 pounds above stage weight that is like kind of a blanket recommendation for whatever reason. But for me, that place is just not sustainable. And
for very few people, what I'd say 10 pounds over. If you're 5'1" and you're a female competitor just drug free, sure. But man, 10 pounds isn't much.
Yeah, you balloon up from 100 to 110.
Yeah,
that scenario.
Yeah, 10% over stage weight if that happens to be. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think like just now, like I'm starting to feel really, really strong in the gym again. Because that's the other thing that my strength stays for the most part, but my during prep, but my upper pushing motions specifically take a hit. And now I'm starting to set PRs again in bench. But it's taken, 5 months?
Yep.
Since November? Yeah, 5 months. So yeah. Was that the answer? I don't even remember.
Yeah, no, that was me just adding some more color to Trexler's question. Okay. And now back to you, Trex.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the magnitude of weight change during prep. The other thing I was going to ask is, you mentioned your strength. Do you feel like you retain most or all of your muscle when you do a prep, or do you feel like you have a little bit of muscle loss in the mix? Because I've talked to some female competitors that are like, I think for Helms, back me up, please. We can see from the case reports for a lot of male competitors, there's gonna be a chunk of muscle loss. But for females, yes, correct, lean mass loss. But for female competitors, not necessarily the case in the literature. So what is your experience like?
I haven't really, thankfully, experienced much muscle loss during prep. I did get an in-body scan done, which I know those aren't super accurate. But it didn't note that I lost much muscle. Although I will say, just from looking at pictures of myself, I feel like maybe from my glutes and my legs, they like at the very end of prep seemed like they got much smaller. I also hadn't gotten that lean before, so it could have been that. But yeah, luckily, I think the rest of me held on to my muscle pretty much the whole time, and it wasn't until maybe like that last little bit when I was like very depleted that I maybe accrued a little bit of, or like lost a little bit of muscle.
Yeah. What's your calorie intake during the off season and then at its lowest point during prep on average?
Well, to be honest, right now I'm not really tracking my food. I know that I'm getting enough protein. So I have no idea what my calorie amount is currently, but if I had to guess, it'd maybe be like 25 to 2,700-ish, somewhere around there. And when I'm cutting, last time I started cutting at like 2,100 or 2,200. And it worked for a while, and you keep cutting down, and I think I ended at like 1,450.
Yep,
was the lowest I got down to.
So you're still over 10K calories per pound, which is pretty good for someone who gets in the kind of shape you got into at the end. It's pretty solid. Yeah. I would say not a completely immune physiology to the demands of prep, but certainly on the good side of things is kind of my assessment. But it's difficult to tease this out because so much of many of the experience of bodybuilders historically who are still around and make up part of the community is baked in what we would probably suggest aren't best practice today. And there's something to be said for staying busy and having, I'd say, a non-orthorexic approach to your food intake and not crash dieting, not having rigid food lists. I mean, you could argue that being vegan is a rigid food list, but it's different. It's not motivated by misinformed beliefs about how energy balance works or which foods are quote unquote good or bad. It's an ethical decision. Totally different, I think, in terms of the psychology of it. So I think not having those, I'm going to say, hanger-ons that make everything just harder unnecessarily, not doing a 12 to 16 week diet, and also being a busy, productive person who's not overly focused on the process, that can make up like a tenfold difference in how hard the diet experience is. And then experience in and of itself, I think, also makes you better and better with each season. Because I would say Maddie's experience mirrors mine now, but I've coming up on my 6th competitive season over a long time. Since years. Yeah, my 2007 season was the first one, so that tells you something, right? So, yeah. But I will say, Maddie and I end at similar calorie intakes. Maybe I'm a little bit higher, but I'm a lot higher in stage weight. So you can do the math there.
Helms, you competed during the Bush administration?
You know what? Not the first Bush administration, not even the second one, bro. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
No, that's not true. That's not true. But yeah, it was before Obama got elected in my first season. This is true.
Wow.
Wow.
When I heard Iron Culture was going to be about bodybuilding history, I didn't know it was going to be a first-person account. I thought we'd be talking to like historians, but that's cool too.
I like how Maddie laughed at that. The guest is now she's comfortable now. She can make fun of my age too. This is great.
Yeah. I am on your birthday.
On my birthday, yes. We're literally celebrating my ever encroaching proximity to death. So yeah. It's good times. Maddie, I do want to ask you about your future in the sport. You've done so much, and I think it's this is changing, but I'm going to be a little bit critical of natural bodybuilding. Sometimes it can be a little bit underwhelming for competitors at a high level to what do I do now? Because they've won several titles and there hasn't been a tremendous change in the accolades, promotion, prize money, or exposure that one gets from many of the natural shows. So a lot of people, they think about jumping ship, pursuing the IFBB route. Other people just kind of lose the luster, going, oh, maybe I'll be the first person to win a 3 or 4 time championship. May not be enough. How do you feel about that? How important are the external accolades as a competitor to you? And what is your plan as a future competitor?
I actually don't have a really concrete answer to that. I'm kind of, I don't know. I'm an indecisive person as is, and I kind of just wait to the last second to make decisions. So I won't make any promises. But I don't know. I just want, it's such a hard decision. Because with my IFBB Pro card, I think I have 1 year to accept. And if I choose to go that route, then I'm kind of locked into the IFBB route, and then I can't compete in the natural, or other natural federations. And ultimately, I just want to compete against the best. I just want to test myself. And the new IFBB natural realm is still pretty new. And so there's not really that many competitions for pros to compete at, which is very limiting. And I don't know what that's going to look like, if it's going to grow. I would guess it will, but at what speed, I'm not sure. And then there's something about the natural federations, the OCB, the WMBF, that I just really like, and what they stand for. So part of me wants to just continue with that. But again, I don't know which route I want to take. And I don't know when I'll compete next. I think maybe potentially I could compete next year. Originally, I thought I was going to have knee surgery this year. And I revisited my surgeon, and he said that I could continue putting it off for a longer period of time without doing any irreparable damage. So with that in mind, I think I'll, just put it off and then maybe compete potentially next year, but who knows? Could take one more off even.
If there was ever a time that's beneficial to be indecisive, it's actually right now. In the natural bodybuilding space, because there are these drastic changes happening. A little bit insider trading, but I can tell you that there are several federations that are doing big things to try to move the sport forward. If you listen to Natty News Daily recently, they had Kyle Gallant on there. He's president of WNBF India as well as WNBF UAE and the Galaxy, which is a collaboration between 4 or 5 different WNBF regional federations, is traveling around, and it's kind of like I guess you could say the Arnold Classic to the Olympia of worlds. And like you said, the NPC tested space is rapidly evolving, and we're also seeing more collaboration between a lot of the other natural federations. And I think my prediction, if I was going to go natural bodybuilding Nostradamus, is that we're going to see a robust WNBF, we're going to see a robust NPC natural, and people are going to have to decide exactly where their priorities lie as a natural athlete, because one or the other may or may not have the same quality of testing. I'll leave the consumer to decide which and whether that changes. And I think there will be a changing space as far as the, I'd say the promotional aspects of being an athlete in the two and how much visibility you get. And then I think we're probably going to see more collaboration between kind of all the other federations between one another. And that's not to say that the INBA and other places aren't also growing. So it's a good time to be like, you know what, I'm not going to plant my flag, because where I'm planting that flag is currently a rapidly evolving space. So I think nothing wrong with that. And to be frank, even if you did lose your pro card status in the IFBB, I think you could get it back again without too much hard work, to be honest. Just kind of sneak into one of the pro qualifiers between the other shows you're doing. So the world is your oyster, my friend, and it's going to be exciting regardless of which direction you go. And I just want to say thank you so much for sharing where you've been, where you may or may not go, and also how you got there and what it's like being a vegan athlete, which I think is evolving. And the science is evolving with it. We now have two. I'm just going to plug these to make Trexler happy. Montine as well as Havea Lorraine. Two long-term studies of a very high quality that have compared omnivores versus vegans. And to our point earlier about do you really need to be at a high-protein diet to kind of wash out these differences? One of them had them around 1.6 grams per kilogram. The other had them around 2.1 grams per kilogram per day of protein in the two groups, both 12 weeks long. And they both also took measurements of lean body mass. Okay, so 2-compartment body composition change, whole muscle changes, so cross-sectional area, as well as biopsies and looking at actual muscle fiber level changes in hypertrophy. And there were really comparable changes between groups. And there was also no significant changes between groups, but if you look at it from like, all right, what's the raw values and changes? They're really similar. And also in terms of performance. So the data's looking good. The anecdotes are looking good. We got world champions walking around fueled on seitan and tofu, folks. It's a bright new world, a bright future in natural bodybuilding. Regardless of which direction you go, we'll see how things shake out and if my Nostradamus predictions were accurate. And before we close this out, I want to give you the floor, Maddie. Is there anything else that you want to say or discuss or bring up, promote, share about your coaching or anything that you think we haven't covered in this episode?
Yeah, sure. I do offer online coaching. If you are interested in online coaching with me, you can go to my Instagram, which is Maddie_Vitality Fitness, and fill out my coaching application on my profile page.
Awesome.
In the bio.
Love it. And if you're looking for world champion level experience and practical experience on how to make a plant-based diet work, I'm sure that's a great place to go, in addition to just badass coaching generally. Trex, is there anything that I missed that you think you need to let the dear listeners know?
No, I think I played defense against you the whole interview, and I think you did a very admirable job, and I respect you and appreciate you for it, and I wish you a happy birthday.
Thank you very much. And the last thing I will say, if you are one of the Iron Culture presented by Mass superfans who's made it all the way to the end of the episode, did you know that we're currently doing a Mass anniversary sale? It's not only Eric Helms' 42nd birthday, it is also Mass's 8th birthday. And, we are, still getting in trouble, occasionally peeing the bed, but we're basically nearly past that embarrassing stage of childhood, moving into that glory days of being 9, 10, before things get really bad and we turn to be 12, 13, just tyrants who are only seeking approval from our peers. So this is the time to get in at the ground floor level for Mass. 8th birthday parties, we're talking bouncy castles, we're talking super soakers, all the fun stuff. Video games that don't have excruciating levels of violence that are inappropriate yet. It's a beautiful time to get in
Helms,
with Mass. Yes.
When does the Mass sale end?
May 2nd. So this is going to come out just in time. You'll have a few days left.
I was a little worried. I thought I was going to have to interrupt you as you were making jokes about your own senility and old age and say, Helms, we're actually not live at the moment.
No, I did the math.
Okay.
I did the math. You will be having a few days before the Mass sale ends. And I feel obligated to bring this up because both Zerdos and myself dropped the ball on the episode that is actually coming out today as we record. Or, hold on, actually, I might be wrong. I ruined it. Because we're going to be having this episode after the one we did. You know what? This one needs to come out before the 1RM one.
Yeah, all stuff that can be settled off the air.
So I'm creating more edits for you right now, Trex, but this one needs to come out before the 1RM episode. We'll swap the order. We're good. Take part in the Mass sale because you can lock in the lowest price you'll ever get at 30% off Mass. And thank you for listening. Thank you, Maddie, for joining us. Thank you, Trex, for your patience. You played excellent offense. I played defense, but it came out fantastic. So tune in next week. Leave us a nice 5-star rating. Share it with your colleagues, and we'll check you. Oh, boy. And we'll see you next time in the next episode of Iron Culture presented by Mass.